Right, well, hello and welcome to the 7-Day F Challenge. I'm Margaret Carhill from the Wessex Astrologer. In these strange times when our lives have been turned upside down, it's easy to believe that we're powerless, that we don't have any control over our lives. But that's not quite true. On a personal level, we still have choices in the way we react to events, and a tiny change in our attitude can make the world of difference to the outcome. And how do we make that tiny change? As Darrelyn says in her book, Astropathology, if you make changes in your handwriting, change will happen. If you don't want any changes in your life, do not make any changes to your handwriting. And it's really as simple as that. I can personally vouch for it, having changed my handwriting with Darrelyn's guidance and seen the results. So, are you up for the challenge? Let's find out more. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Darrelyn Gunzburg.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. And welcome to everyone. And I just want to say a few words before we actually begin, basically reiterating what I said in the email to you. This is a free lecture. And in this time of COVID-19, where people are stressed, finding it hard to move forward in particular ways in their life, it's an ideal time really to just kind of reboot the system and find out where your baseline is and to start making the changes that you want. So what we're going to do is going to look very closely at the way you write one letter, just one letter, because if you try and do too much, you won't do anything. So I'm going to show you what those changes are. I'm then going to talk through how you can then take the next 7 days to undergo the challenge. And I have to say that some of you who found it difficult to get into the room, you've already started the challenge. So well done you. But I think when change comes, you know, it heralds itself by lots of gates and you have to fight your way through. So let it be an imprimatur of your willingness to change, that you may have found it difficult to get into the room or find the link, etc., etc. And then at the end, I will discuss that challenge, and I will be sending you, because there'll be 7 slides which outline that challenge, I'll be sending you that slide afterwards as a PDF so that you can follow it through and start undergoing that challenge. So there's a few points just to note. The lecture is going to be roughly 45 minutes in length, and then we will have a 5-minute break, and then we will have 30 minutes of Q&A. The Q&A is going to be moderated by Bernadette, and so please, as you go through, type your questions in the chat box. She will gather them together, and then she will read them out, and I'll answer them in the Q&A session. And you can ask as many questions as you wish. You can ask it as long as you wish, but just bear in mind that we're going to try and keep it as 30 minutes of Q&A. With the email, you also had the opportunity to get a discount on the book. You don't have to buy the book. You don't have to buy it at all. It's simply if you resonate with what I'm going to show you, you might want to then investigate other letters of the alphabet, in which case we felt that it was an opportune time to offer a discount, and so you can take up that offer should you wish to do so afterwards, but you don't have to. You can just simply work with what I'm going to give you. The lecture and the Q&A is going to be recorded. It will then be posted on the YouTube through Wessex Astrologer and through Astrologos. So that's the sort of journey that we're going to take, and I'm going to share the screen while you all buckle up and settle in for what I hope is going to be a very inspiring journey. Inspiring to you, because I want you to see how you can make small changes and how it can have a big impact on your life. So let us begin. And the lecture is for astrologers to see their chart in their handwriting and to help improve the quality of different aspects. But I know that some of you here are not necessarily astrologers, or you're beginner astrologers. That's fine. Change will still happen if I show you, if you go with the journey that I'm going to take you on. It still will happen. So be aware that if you want change to come into your life, this is a way that it can happen. And really, it's about you being able to see what you believe about yourself and how you can change that. So I did ask you to make sure that you had your favorite pen. So if you can all hold that up, please. I should say that this is lean forward technology. I'm going to be asking you to engage. Thank you for holding up your pens. Excellent. I'm asking you to engage with the process rather than sit back and have me tell you. It's not about me telling you, it's about me showing you so that you become a master of the change that you want to undertake. So hopefully you've also got your notebooks, whether lined or unlined, and just have your chart nearby because you're going to be referring to it, not me. So the first thing I want you to do is to find out how you write your letter F. So pick up your pen and your paper now, and I want you to write this sentence, please. You are as young as your faith, as old as your doubt, as young as your self-confidence, as old as your fear. Just relax, don't try and do anything fancy. Don't try and be prescriptive, just write as you normally would. Let your hand move freely. Don't think too much about it, just write the sentence. And just for the fun of it, I put a few more sentences here, but you don't have to take those on board. But if you're fast and speedy and you want to do a few more Fs, then you can write some of those words down as well. You don't have to. If you've got the first sentence, that's fine. Because what I want to go on to is I want to ask you a question. You've probably never done this before, but see if you can identify how you write your F. Now, obviously, it's going to change as to whether it's in the beginning of a sentence, the middle of a sentence, middle of a word, or the end of a word. But just write a few more F words that you've written for the previous sentence and just see if you can work out how you write your F. If you can't work it out, that's okay. That's fine. It's just to get you to start to think and pay attention as to what you're doing when you're writing the F. Okay, so what is it that you're doing as you write? So this is about writing in general. As we write, what we're doing is we're transmitting our ideas and our thoughts and our energy onto the paper. And I'll just put pause there and I'll say, if any of you have ever received birthday cards, cards when you've come to something of great joy, like a graduation, or if you've lost someone and you receive a card of condolences, how wonderful it is to receive the handwriting from someone who is participating with you in your feelings and emotions. Because what you're receiving from that handwriting is the feelings that they put into the handwriting when they wrote it. It's very similar to if you have a favorite painting that you've always loved and you've seen it in a book, in reproduction, and then you finally get a chance to go to an art gallery and you see it in the flesh. It's really quite a different experience because in the brush strokes, you're still feeling the energy of the person who painted that painting. So words, handwritten words, are very powerful, whether you send them to someone else or whether you keep them for yourself. And the thoughts that we have as we write aren't just written randomly. Sometimes They're going to be lists of practicality. They're going to be ideas that you might be writing as a stream of consciousness in your journal. So they become very, very personal. Sometimes they're creative writing and you're trying to shape a story or a narrative. So they are always invested with meaning. And sometimes you might notice that your handwriting changes in different circumstances. Sometimes it looks really gorgeous and other times you're rushing and it looks scrawled. That's fine. They're all parts of you. But if you know what you're writing and how you're writing it, then you can change it. You can see in your handwriting the different shapes that you're making. And then if you can link that with difficult aspects in your chart, you really have a very powerful tool for being able to better understand that difficult aspect in your chart and perhaps to change it. So handwriting is visual. You see it as you write. It's emotional. It reflects your moods. As I've just said, it can change when you feel differently under different circumstances. It's tactile. You're using a pen, you're using paper, you're touching. But sometimes also you can feel as you write. You know, sometimes you can get those lovely squared nibs that are quite thick, and you can actually sense it, almost like calligraphic pens. You can feel it as you write on the paper. And it's sound filled. You can hear the pen on the paper, but you can also sense or hear your thoughts sometimes as you capture them and write them down. So it's a wonderfully rounded process. And this is what captures and records like a net, like a very fine gossamer net. It's recording and capturing your thoughts, facts, ideas, dreams, hopes, goals, practical necessities. And sometimes, very often, our fears, things that we're not aware of. And those are the things we're trying to find in the handwriting so that you can help to shift and change that. And all of this obviously comes from the world around us. If we're thinking about the world or the people we've met, or we're writing about the world around us, then that writing is going to be captured on the page. But that world around us, the physical world around you, is made up visually of a tripartite division. We have sky, mountains and peaks, or clouds, stars. We've got plains, and then we've got lowlands, rivers and valleys. And we can keep looking at that and seeing that in all sorts of landscapes. Sky, mountains or peaks. We've got the plains here. Got the lowlands, the oceans. Here it is again. This is Cinque Terre in Italy. The sky, the mountains or the peaks, or just the side of the cliff, and the plains where the houses are built, and then there's the lowlands, the oceans. And here's another one. This is a flatter terrain. This is the Nile Delta, the Nile in Egypt. We've got sky, mountains and peaks, actually along near Luxor, the plains and the lowlands, the rivers and the valleys. And you can even see this in buildings and urban landscapes. There's towers and roof lines. There's a cathedral. There's the nave of the cathedral, and there's the crypt underground. And if you're walking in London by the Thames along the skyline, you can see the towers and the roof line, the roads and pavements, and the River Thames, some of which you can see and some of which runs underneath the pavement. So you can think of the paper on which you write as a landscape also. It has sky, mountains and peaks. It's got plains, and it's got lowlands, rivers and valleys. And therefore, the lines of writing that you write inhabit that landscape. So if we're to take, for example, and look at a variation of Fs, then you can see that a lot of that falls in the Plains Valley. There's bits that stick up at the top, which are in the mountains, and those are in the lowlands. I've taken the letter F because it's a very unique letter in the alphabet because it crosses all three terrains. It's a universal traveller. It allows us to look at your F through those three regions. So let's just talk about what those regions are. If we go back to our landscape, we can see that the mountains or the sky, they're the parts of our landscape where we look up. If you've ever hiked in the highlands of Scotland, or you've ever hiked in the mountains of Tibet or Nepal, it's the same thing. We look up, we try to ascend to a peak. And when we look up, even if we just look up into the sky, we're always looking up for inspiration. So it's where we seek inspiration, where we reach for our dreams, where we set our goals, our plans and aspirations. We're told to reach high with our ambitions. We're never told to reach low, always high. So it's where we reach upwards, where we stretch away from our body. That's the movement that we've got when we're looking at the mountains region. The plains is where we live. It's our practical world. Middle part of the writing. It's where we create what I call goat paths. You have familiar paths, sixth house paths that you take, don't you? And you have days that you go shopping to Sainsbury's or Tesco or Lidl or wherever your local supermarket is. And that's going to always happen because you need to top up groceries and so on. You might go on regular walks on a particular landscape around your urban area, or you might go and walk by the beach, run by the beach, but they're your terrain where you are familiar with that landscape. It's where you live, where we live, the plains. And on that region, we move laterally, we move horizontally through our mundane world. In our daily life, how we relate to our children, our family, partners, and pets. And the lowlands or the valleys, they're places in the landscape where we gaze into the depths, don't we? We look at this, something like this, and we see the reflection of the clouds, but we're actually looking downwards, looking inwards. They can be restful places like this, or they can be deep, churning waves that are caught in a storm. They can be quite angry places. They can be places where we gaze into the depths, or where we explore them, such as a garden here that's been landscaped out of nothing. Or we go fishing and we go swimming underwater, scuba diving, and it becomes a place of enjoyment, somewhere where we like to go. But it can also be places that we don't like to go. It can be things that throw up monsters from the deep, and there's many, many myths that talk about these monsters that rise up from the ocean floor. But it's an inward movement. We gaze down, we gaze inward, and that movement is towards us, towards our body. And these movements can be mirrored in the letters we make on our paper landscape. So what I want to do next is to look at some letter Fs using this landscape terrain. You might be someone who makes an F like this. So there's a very fine stroke at the top, and there's a very fat loop at the bottom in various shapes. And there's a plains region. So this is someone whom we could say has an overemphasis of the loop in the valley landscape. So I've just sort of put the ratio here on the side. It's very faint mountains, almost a lack of ambition or a squashing of that ambition. The person doesn't want to reach up. They've got that stroke there, but it's almost non-existent in their life. The plains region, yes, they do the practical work, but look at these great fat loops. There's a great deal of emotion there. And this is one example of someone writing the word of. It looks like a Leo sign, doesn't it? So I looked for a better one. And you can see it in the word of Queen Elizabeth II. And I put this there because I want to show you that it's not necessarily a bad thing. There is no condemnation or condonation in what I'm showing you. I'm just showing you where to look in your handwriting and then to correlate that with your chart. You might be someone who doesn't access their emotions, in which case it's a good thing to put some emotions in. For the Queen, I thought it was very fascinating that she basically isn't allowed to have ambitions of her own. She's there to serve the people. And what that shows is that she does it it's a balanced loop at the bottom there. It's not overemphasized. She does it with care, with love, with empathy and engagement. And this is her role as the monarch, and this is what she's happy doing. There's a converse F where it's the reversed. We've got everything up in the top region here, very fat loop reaching high into the mountains. This is someone who's got enormous ambition, huge ambition, and a good practicality to be able to underscore it, does the right things to be able to reach their ambitions. But look at this, no empathy. Now, this might be a good thing for the person because they might be swamped with a lot of emotional energy in their chart, a lot of Neptune perhaps, and they're trying to handle it and balance it so that they're not swamped by this, so they can reach for their ambitions. If any of you have read the book Becoming by Michelle Obama or seen the documentary, she talks there about how she basically had to put her own needs on hold for a while, but then she and Barack Obama had marital counseling so that it could be better balanced. Now, I don't know her writing, I don't know her chart. I'm just giving you that as an example of someone who might be wanting to bring that ambition in a better way, a more balanced way in their life. But for this person, this is how their landscape looks. Big, big mountains that they want to reach. Good practicality, but almost no emotional connection. And here's an interesting example. This is an F, which is pretty balanced in terms of how it reaches up into the mountains and down into the valley and along the plains. But look at what's going on here. Look at this. There's this angle there, really sharp angle into an area that's meant to be compassionate, emotional, empathic, engaged, aware. Angles are formed by two lines that diverge, as you can see here. In fact, there's two angles that have been made here. The person's come down to make the hard angle. They've gone back against the flow of the writing, and they've moved forward again, creating two angles. So these angles, which are formed from two rays diverging from a common point, is fine when you've got a letter such as a V or a W. Some people will make it with the sharp points. And it requires precision to make such an angle. So when that attribute is found consistently in handwriting, not just in the letter V, then this is good because it can show people who've got divergence, can apply logic to their thinking, particularly when it's in the plains region, the practicality of life. You can see this logicality. These are people who've got good investigative skills, well thought out methods and systems for examining and studying a subject, and a lot of determination. But when you find it in something like this, then it's almost like there's a gripping, applying logic into an area that is not meant to have that logic and not meant to have that sharpness. This is possibly someone who is finding it difficult to deal with the emotions in their life and is trying to really find a way to become quite separate from it. Or they may be sharp in their emotions. Another F to look at. This is rather a lovely, well-formed F, but you'll notice that what happens is that there's good ambition, nice reaching for their goals, very, very much focused on the plains area here. But here and there's a lot of emotion, and that's good, and it's pretty much balanced with their ambition, but something happens right at the end. There's this flourish that goes backwards. It pulls them away from the direction of writing. It's flipped backwards. So let's just stop for a moment and talk about direction of travel. And I know some of you will say that, you know, you write with your left hand, and so it's hard to, you know, your letters do go backwards, or they slant backwards because you write in the left hand. But I know plenty of left-handed people who write forwards. And indeed, when you're looking at writing, you're not necessarily going to be able to pick up whether it's left or right-handedness. The left-hand side of your page designates the past, how we feel about it, how much of an impact or hold it still has on you. And in the West, we write from left to right. So we're moving always from where we are forwards in time. The linearity of time for us is forwards, from left to right. It's also about how well you leave what's completed behind you. So you complete something and move forward to the right, and how well you utilize what you've learned from the past as your resources in the present. And the right-hand side, therefore, is going to be the future. As you move from one side to the other, you're leaving what was in the past and moving forwards in time. And that's how we read writing, is that something happens and then the next word carries you forward to the future. So therefore, it's also your expectations, your enthusiasm for what lies ahead of you, and how you wish to be involved in the environment and the world around you. Just a fairly general shape so that you can just start to look at the letter F. So when we look at this and we see that this is good ambition, this is nice with the emotions, but when it comes to the practicality, something's pulling them backwards. Something is they can't quite get the ability to move forward. We don't know what it is, and we can see that it's a very nice flourish. And here's the thing, this might be the handwriting of someone who's a historian, in which case, fine, yes, they're always looking back at the past. So that would be a positive for them, possibly, just depending on their chart and what they wanted to change. So nothing's prescriptive. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just simply saying, look at what this person is doing with their F. Okay, another F that you may or may not see in your writing. This is someone who's got good ambition. The emotional part is a little bit overextended, but look at what they've done here. They've created this big circle. They've gone back and forwards over it, and they've created a container or a knot. So let's just talk about what that means when you see these things in your handwriting. I call it left luggage if it's in the plains, and then there's attics if it's in the top part, the mountainous region, or cellars in the valley or the rivers. And they talk about how we hide from ourselves or others. Now, depending on how you write them, some letters of the alphabet contain areas that are legitimately completely closed. For example, O, some people write A's with little circles in them, that's fine, B's. F's with a loop, if you're writing, it's hard to tell when you've got typefaces like this, but G's, H's with a top loop, J's, K's, some L's, O, P, Q, Y. You know, there are legitimate reasons for writing some of those with loops in, and that's fine. What I'm talking about is when you've got additional loops, extra elements that you attach, and they can be anything from rings, circles, slashes, dashes, that just get added into a letter and tell you a great deal about things about yourself that you might be hiding from yourself or hiding from others. They can occur in all landscapes. When we attach these extra elements, it's really important to look at what's going on here. So for this person in the plains landscape, there's something, because it's to the left-hand side, this is something from the past. They don't want people to know about them. And it may be precious, and they don't want to get rid of it. And they've very carefully contained it in this circle. They're protecting it. But until you talk to the person about this and look at what's in the chart, then you're not going to know what it is. But it's sort of like an echo or a reverberation, something that keeps pulling them back, trying to get them to resolve this issue. Okay, so a final look at a letter that's really not a good letter to make, but I know that a lot of you have been taught how to do this, and it's more ubiquitous than I had at first realized. And it's called the Propeller F, and it's a letter of self-sabotage, because the person starts off in the planes, they move up, and then they come back on themselves. And this is what it looks like in a person's handwriting. And so we see this as the person begins in the plains landscape, they move up, reach for their goals, they come down to go to their emotions to put this in, because what we're getting is a mix of all three landscapes that are going to be balanced. But what happens is they suddenly make a U-turn to the past and the flow of energy is reversed. There's another type of Propeller F that doesn't look like a Propeller F, because the person begins with high expectations. That's fine. They move down to the emotions, and then they make a U-turn to the past, and the flow of energy is reversed. So what's happening for the person? What we find happening for them is, and this is actually really quite a lovely, it's a strong, you can see from the strength of what's been written on the page, this is strong individual, highly creative, a very forceful letter, because it begins high in the mountain peaks, but she's used to carrying out other people's ideas instead of her own, and she has this very full valley loop, and out of frustration and feeling trapped, she unconsciously uses these emotions to undermine her efforts. She uses these emotions to pull herself back. And it is a letter of self-sabotage, because it acts as a propeller, and a propeller doesn't go anywhere. And you can try this, and I want you to try it now for yourself. Just try doing this particular stroke. It's like miles of lace, isn't it? And it's a really lovely stroke to do when you are in a heightened state and you want to calm yourself down. It's really lovely, because it just kind of keeps you treading water, not going anywhere, not moving forward, staying calm, staying calm. If you want to try changing your F, and this is just a suggestion, then I would suggest you begin in the plains landscape, reach for your goals, come down to the emotions, add your emotions in and loop forward, and then tie it in a clean knot or bow by adding in the practicality and driving forward. So just have a go yourself at trying this F. And I've got a sentence you can try. The fast fox flew over 5 fences. Just see what happens. Have a go. If it feels weird, that's fine. If it feels good, that's good. Just see what happens. And as you do it, think about what you're doing. You're starting off in the plains, you've got a plan, you're moving up to your goals, adding in vital emotions, coming back to the center, which is again the practicality, and then moving forward with your life. Okay, we've done a lot on the letter, so let's just look now at how it marries with the astrology. Okay, I can see some of you are still writing there. You can always come back to this, but let's just see how it marries with the astrology. So here are some Fs with their owner's charts. We're going to look at the handwriting first. Long time ago, when clients used to send in their deposits by post, and they would include a handwritten note, gave me a wonderful opportunity to be able to see where some of the issues were. So just from the small pieces of information I've given you, you know already, and this is the edge of the paper, you know that this is someone who is hugging the past, afraid to move forward. They've got loads and loads of practicality. Look at all this on the planes level. Look at this, loads and loads of practicality. Not a lot of ambition, but what I want to point out to you is this F. And you can see it's a propeller F, and what has she done with her O? She's done 2 circles, so there's something that she wants to hide, either from herself, or she's protecting it, or she's unconscious of it. It's in the practical planes area. But whatever she's doing, she's shooting herself in the foot with that propeller F. So what I would expect to see in this chart is I would expect to see a lot of earth because it's so practical. I might even expect to see Saturn prominent in her chart. But I'm also looking for areas in her chart which are difficult, hidden, or emotionally upsetting for her. I'm looking for the propeller F and possibly that container. And this is her chart. And she's got all that practicality and, just as we were talking about before, very little ambition for herself. But look at this 10th house Saturn. That 10th house Saturn is very strongly placed, highly practical. She should be out there wanting, you would think, wanting to be prominent, wanting to be leading in some way. However, she's also got a 12th house sun, which can be extremely difficult in terms of the role model that she's given when she's young, the lost or weakened father figure, and it's connected to the sun Pluto. So again, emphasizing the weakened father figure, or the father figure who's not the strong role model. And then she's also got the Mars in detriment in the 12th house. So if she wants to take action, she has to really get into her emotions. And the F is showing me that she's getting into her emotions, but she's really quite distressed about it or upset that she's having to support someone else in their journey rather than herself. And this, in fact, was the case. She was the house mother and she was supporting her husband in his work. And so we worked a lot on her changing her F, moving the direction of travel forward rather than shooting herself in the foot, and then letting go of, changing slowly. Not the O, first of all. Just work on the F. Remember, if you do too much too soon, it's too fast. You're starting to talk to the part of you in your chart where change can happen. And that part has to agree. It agreed enough to get you to come to this lecture. So that's a good thing. And hopefully as you're looking at your Fs, you're also talking to that part and saying, it's possible we could make these small changes. Are you happy to do so? It's like someone giving up smoking. If the smoker doesn't agree to give up, it doesn't happen. Or someone giving up a wine or alcoholism. Okay, another example. This was not a client of mine, unfortunately. This is Jane Austen. Jane Austen, who most of you will know, was an English novelist known primarily for her 6 major novels, which interpret, critique and comment upon the British landed gentry at the end of the 18th century. Said to be the first novelist. And so I'm looking at her writing, and from this you can see she's actually very practical. She's got lots of spaces between the lines, so she's not crowding out other people. She's got nice areas going into her emotions and good ambition. This looks very balanced. And you'll notice the letters are slanting towards the right. So there's a great deal of enthusiasm. This is really quite lovely handwriting. But if you actually go into it, start to see her Fs. This one hasn't got much going into her mountains or her sky, and there's a bit of a point below. Now, admittedly, I'm working from something that's digital and it's on the internet, so I'm not going to be too prescriptive, but I'm just looking. The next F is a bit similar to this, a bit similar to the first one. The next F is lovely, isn't it? It's nice and balanced. Perhaps a little bit too much emotions, but it's quite balanced. The loops might want to be a little bit more rounded, but you know, it's okay. But look what's in the middle there. There's a knot. And this one is definitely a Propeller F. And this mix of making her Fs is prevalent across her handwriting. You could go down and look at another row where she's written Fs and you'd see the same mix. So what's going on here? Sometimes she feels confident of herself. Sometimes she feels very buoyed up by her emotions. She feels strengthened by her ambition. Sometimes she feels she wants to hold on to things. Sometimes she feels that she's not worthy of it and is shooting herself in the foot. When we look at her chart, we can see this replicated in her chart. So here's her plains area. Her F dives deep into the river of emotions and empathy, and here you can see the Neptune on the ascendant and the Sun on the IC. So these are all places where she really is resonant to the emotions around her and responsive to it and is willing to engage with that. And that's fine. That's reflected in her chart. Then there's this knot of something that she's holding on to closely. And here we can see that, again, the ruler of the Sun on the IC is actually the ruler of the 12th. So something which is possibly coming from a hidden area of her life or her family history is then really embedded into her family as she knows it, and the taproot into her past of her father and the male figures in her life, even though it's a Sun in Sag. And this is an area that you might want to talk with her about. I should say that this is a letter that she wrote to her brother delivering difficult news, so you would expect to see there's some areas of her writing that display this emotion. And then there's this Propeller F. And she has a Moon Saturn in her chart, but the Saturn is exalted. Moon Saturn can be very, very difficult when young. It can be a sense of rejection, isolation, separation, anxiety. But it also, as one grows older and is surrounded by the love of her family, which she did have, it strengthens. But it's exalted. She has to keep putting energy in. So there are losses here and separations where she possibly feels that she doesn't deserve this and therefore shoots herself in the foot. Now, this is probably not what you'd think of Jane Austen when you see her success now. But we have to remember that in the time she was writing, she wasn't necessarily writing under her own name. It was a new profession for a woman. She had lots of losses in her family in terms of financial losses. They had to move a lot of times and so on. So you can see this in her history. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but I'm saying that you start to be able to see what's in her handwriting by what's in her chart. And one final example before we take a break, and this is Mozart. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who needs no introduction to you. I'm sure you've all heard and loved his music. Very prolific and influential composer of the classical period. And he's got really interesting writing. This is Italian and this is German, but we can still look at those Fs because we're looking at a Latin language. You have to be careful because when he's writing, this looks like it's an F, carissima, but actually it's the way that he was writing an S. It's carissima, carissima. So we can't include that as being a propeller F. But let me show you some of the Fs in his chart. There's this, si parle, there's an F there, and there's another one here, fosse. So the first is an F, the second is an S. It's a double S. It's part of grammar. And then there's fratello, which is brother, and this is the F there. And look at how he makes his Fs. They're very consistent, aren't they? Very consistent. They're very balanced. They're balanced between how he seeks to reach up to the mountains, to very clearly place the cross of the F into the plains area, and then balanced in how he reaches into his emotions. What he's doing is, if we look at his chart, we can see his F dives deep into the river of emotions and empathy and ends in a hook, and we can see it there. He's got a moon Pluto in his chart, and it's square the nodal axis, and it's also in the 4th house there, even though it's in Sagittarius. So the left-hand hook, it's almost an emotional, it's going backwards, but it's holding something. It's a bowl, it's carrying something. It's perhaps he's inhibited by his past. And what we know of Mozart is that his mother died when he was 15, and this was a very deep blow to him. So for him, it might be okay that this is how he remembers and carries that moon Pluto. If he is suffering for it, then you would want to help him to change it. But if not, he's created this F, very, very consistent as he writes his Fs, which holds this little bowl or this hook into the past. And we start to see that in his chart. Okay, so where does this leave us? The 7-day F challenge for you is this. Day 1, a standalone F. Just take 5 minutes to handwrite your thoughts. Look carefully at your F and write it again and become aware of what thoughts arise as you do this and where you feel resistance in your hand, in your mind, in your emotions. And just practice writing a few more of them in your notebook, just 5 minutes. That's all that's required. And at the same time, have a look at your F and see if you can find the part of your chart that it's reflecting and that you want to change. It could be a difficult aspect in your natal chart, or it could be an area that is going to be affected by transits. Just think about how it would feel to have those changes alive in your life. Day 2, start unpacking your writing. Take 5 minutes to handwrite your thoughts again. Again, look at the F. See if you're writing the new one more easily, the new F more easily. And just write standalone words with the F. Rather than just the F itself, start putting them into a word. And again, just feel how it feels in your body. Is there any self-talk? Are you saying, oh, I don't know if I can do this. This is stupid. Whatever it is, whatever it is. Or are you excited? Are you excited? Day 3, start to put it into whole sentences. And I've just put sonnet 14 there because it mentions astronomy and the sky in a very beautiful way, and it's got lots of Fs, but you can choose any sentences you wish. Now, if this is difficult to write lots of Fs like this, go back a step, go back to the sentences, to the words, or go back to just doing the F. Don't push it, just try to work with it. Where's the resistance? What's going on? Day 4 is the middle bit, and this is where you're going to start to say, this is stupid, this doesn't work for me. This works for everyone else and doesn't work for me. And so you need to just sit that part down and have a cup of tea with it and say, well, just, it's okay. Let's just see what would happen if you let go of doing the old F. Be really gentle with yourself. Remember, any change has to be taken with small steps. But keep writing, keep practicing, keep getting that part of you that's resisting to work with you, to do the writing. But more importantly, look for small changes in what's happening around you. It's really, really tiny. Are you less reactive to certain things? Are you more open to certain things? Just be very mindful of what's going on in your environment and in this moment. Day 5, just very slowly ease into this. Just again, 5 minutes at the beginning of the day. And if it feels difficult, there's some suggestions as to how to move around it. Just always be listening to what's happening to you. Look at where the F falls in its word or on your paper landscape, how it connects with other letters, and where your resistance is telling you that you need to just slowly look at that. Day 6, starting to make sense, hopefully. And I'm suggesting you might want to write those first few lines again in your notebook. You are as young as your faith, as old as your doubt, as young as your self-confidence, as old as your fear. And look back at how you wrote it in this lecture. And then try writing it like this. You are as young as your faith, as old as your doubt, as young as your self-confidence, as old as your fear. And then try writing this, fierce and strong and full of fire. And just see what happens. Just see what happens. Do you get scared of writing that or writing it big? What happens? And day 7, where to from here? So again, just write freely now and have a look at your handwriting and just see what's happening. And write down anything that's happened in your thinking or how you approach tasks, how you see the future, whether it feels different or you can sense you can handle change better. And always doing it in concert with what you want to change in your natal chart, how you want it to move forward and shift it slightly. Not a big change, just little, slowly, gently does it. And so that's your challenge, should you wish to undertake it. And just remember the 3 Ps, persistence, perseverance, and patience. And also remember, it's not the end, it's just the beginning of change. And so I wish you enormous good fortune in doing this, because it's very, very exciting, even if it's scary. And it's something that you want to bring in and implement. And you may not end up doing the F in that way totally, but you'll find a way that works for you. If you need to let go of emotion, don't do the loop so big. If you need to stretch more, your ambitions, make the loops higher. It's all as you want it to be. You're in charge.
Thank you. It's been absolutely amazing. Really, really fascinating. I'd forgotten so much, and we did that book over 10 years ago.
2009, yes.
Yeah. And just watching you talk through the landscape made me realise I was looking at my writing so fiercely, thinking sort of where I am now and what's changed. And I am going to be hit by a whole load of transits to my Cancer sun. And it made me feel really hopeful, actually, You know, that I've got some sense of what to do with it now. I've got an idea of where the difficult areas are, what I'm fearing out of all it. So thank you for giving us brilliant tools. It's been amazing, really, really good. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Margaret, and thank you everyone for turning up. It's been, your questions have been fantastic, and I just really hope that this gives you a simple little thing, a pen and paper, actually gives you a sense of control in your life and being able to navigate the next step, because these are difficult, uncertain times, and we only need to have just a small part of us that feels that we can do something that's within our control, and life becomes much more nourishing and engaging for us. So everyone, all the best, and just, yeah.
So people, unmute yourself and we'll give Darrelyn a round of applause. But unmute your microphone so we can hear you all. And let's have a clap around the world.
Yay! Oh, goddess.
Thanks a lot. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.